Ladies and gentlemen, freaks and geeks, brothers and sisters around the world, it is your chocolate Nubian soul brother, the esoteric Noeti. That's me, my powerful Hanuman symbol over there. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to have a look at the political spectrum test. I think this is a great way of delving into many of the contentious issues that we face around the globe. And I want to say first and foremost that I don't consider myself someone that is interested in politics. I've always thought of myself as someone that is interested in philosophy, morality, sustainability, but I've always stayed away from politics. And I found that the one philosophical ideology that also tied into politics that I resonated with was voluntarism. And I liked it because it was the only political stance that really wasn't a political stance. It was based off of the moral stance that it is always wrong to initiate violence. And I find that some people have come to the understanding of voluntarism, anarcho-capitalism, call it what you will, through an understanding of economics. I arrived at it through an understanding of philosophy. I found that I've always maintained this idea. As a kid, I was brought up being influenced a lot by the Vedic scripture, so the Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, all the classic Indian writings, but also through classical philosophy. And I spent my early childhood going through a lot of books dealing with metaphysics, Eastern philosophy, gone through well over 10,000 hours of that stuff. And the one core theme that I've always found is the idea of principles of doing something not because it is necessarily going to lead to the most amount of good, but because it is inherently right or wrong. And I found that within the more progressive school of thought, within the collectivist ideologies, socialism, communism, you have the idea of utilitarianism, which is more focused on creating the best society and trying to focus on creating what pleases the most amount of people as possible, which is a thought that is a little removed from the classical literature that you find within Aristotle, Plato, objectivism, Nicomachean ethics, or just plain deontological principles. So I kind of wanted to delve into this particular analysis by going through these questions and explaining my answers to the questions that we are going to encounter in this video. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us tackle the first question. Each individual enjoys bodily autonomy and has rights that no other individual or group may violate. True. That's the fundamental basis of individualism or voluntarism, that you essentially own your body, you own your mind, and you can do anything you want provided you are not directly harming anyone in the process. So yes, strongly agree with that. Okay, individuals have the freedom to decide what they knowingly and voluntarily consume. Yes, that is true. Provided you're not harming anyone in the process, you have a right to eat whatever you want. Let's move on. Slavery is acceptable in certain circumstances, such as punishment for crime. Slavery, of course, is not acceptable. Most of us in the Western world are aware of that. In regards to punishment for crime, I don't actually believe in punishment as such. I believe in restitution. I don't really think it solves anything if someone has done something that's horribly wrong and you want to imprison them. One, you'll find that it's going to cost a lot of money and time and for you if you want to imprison someone. But when it comes to restitution, yeah, like the ancient Celts would have, they focused their entire system on restitution as opposed to imprisonment. And if someone had done something that was in violation of the laws, the mandates that they had in place, every tour, every club, state, so to speak, had their own little system called a tour. And for those that are not aware, the ancient Celts, they were anarchists. They had an anarchist society, and essentially the individuals would choose what tour, what state, so to speak, they wanted to be part of. And granted, it has certain elements of democracy. For instance, you could elect a king, and obviously there are laws that would be agreed upon. But essentially, you had the voluntary decision to choose what state or what tour you wanted to be in. Then there's a Brahman that would deal with the restitution. And rather than focusing on imprisonment, you would submit yourself to the rulings of this Brahman or Brahman, and whatever he arrived at, based off of the issue, you would submit yourself to that ruling. And similarly, I think you should have a system based off of restitution, not punishment. Definitely not punishment through slavery. I don't think slavery is a good idea, and I don't think it's an acceptable form of punishment, even in the worst cases. Okay, so is definitely disagree with that. All right. I'm going to move through these with speed if I can. There's a lot of questions to get through. Freedom of expression should be unhindered by government regardless of the content. Totally agree. You have a right to express yourself regardless of the content. Just because you're offended by what I express does not give you the right to pass laws to prevent me from doing so. Hate speech should be banned. No, hate speech should not be banned. Granted, there are certain things that I'm going to say that are going to offend you. Subjectively, you could determine anything to be hateful speech. I think you're an idiot. That may be true, it may not be. But you don't have a right to prevent me from speaking my mind, provided I am not uttering false accusations. So saying that you've done something that you have not done consciously, you really can't pass any law to prevent me from doing that. Provided I'm not inciting imminent violence, so saying, hey everybody, let's kill this person right now, which is indirectly, consciously advocating for violence to be permitted on someone. That's violence through proxy. You can advocate that is actually a violation. In fact, it is a violation. So whereas you can speak in generalities and say, I don't like this person, I think so-and-so is an idiot, I think people of this race suck, etc. Now you're a douchebag, and quite frankly, I think social pressure should be put on people like that to not have their viewpoints listened to by the general mass, but you cannot pass laws to prevent people from speaking their mind. And referring to that as hate speech doesn't make it any different. Doesn't deter from the fact that people have a right to say what they want and what they think about you. So hate speech should be banned. Disagree. Okay. The control of communications by government is necessary so as to prevent the spread of ideas that may undermine the stability of the nation. No, I don't believe the government should have the right to control anything for that matter, through the use of force, and even if they're trying to prevent some future scenario from eventuating. Disagree with that. Provision of the internet should be socialized and made available free of charge. Disagree. Yes, the internet is a great thing, but you don't have the ability to make that free. If it's not free, if people want to charge a particular fee rather for a service, then that's how it is. You can't say, we're not going to allow you to charge that fee because we need to make this thing free. Provided it's voluntary, it's fine. So disagree with that. People should be free to engage or abstain from religious activities that do not violate the rights of others. Yeah, absolutely. You can think whatever you want, as crazy as that may be. I just think you're an idiot sometimes if your thoughts are not sound. But hey, who am I to say? At the end of the day, I sure as hell don't have a right to pass legislation to prevent you from thinking these things or following your religious practices, provided you are not harming anyone in the process. I mean, this stuff is so simple. I mean, I feel like if Jesus Christ reincarnated in that time, he would be a voluntarist. Essentially try to bring about the most amount of good, but he'd do this without violating people, without advocating for other people to take shit away from you. That stuff is just not right. I think that's the fundamental idea within Judeo-Christian ethics. You know, don't steal, don't rape. I mean, you find that within the Jefferson Bible, you have the sanitized version of Christianity. You basically take the Bible and you extract from that all of these secular principles. Don't rape, don't steal, don't commit force or fraud. These are the ideas that are inherent within voluntarism. And you apply these without any relation to any of the metaphysical ideas within Christianity. And essentially this is what you have, a voluntarist system. So voluntarism, whether or not people realize it, is essentially the modern day manifestation of Christianity applied in a definitive sense, objectivism. Now granted, a lot of people don't look at it within the realms of metaphysical, supernatural deities along the lines of these principles being axiomatically inherent within the universe. A lot of people look at this at a very secular mindset, that you own yourself, and that's the route that I tend to take, because a lot of the people that are not spiritually inclined understand this. It's an objective way of looking at the world based off of these first principles. Don't rape, don't steal, don't assault, don't commit force or fraud, essentially. And through that, you can arrive at everything else logically without any need for subjectivity. Essentially, voluntarism is an objective way of looking at ethics without having to go into the realms of what you think may be right or wrong, but based off of the idea that you own yourself and you can do anything you want, provided you're not directly harming anyone in the process. Granted, I believe morality consists of more than this. Obviously, it's incumbent upon us to do what we can to help others, but as soon as you believe that it's right to force other people to do certain things in order to bring about the good, then you are moving yourself into the realm of utilitarian ethics, in the realm of collectivist ethics. Anyway, let's move on. So just to make sure I have the right answer to this, people should be free to engage or abstain from religious activities that do not violate the rights of others. Yes, of course. Blasphemy laws should be reinstated. No. That's ridiculous. It's kind of like hate speech. It's in reference to God. People have a right to say, I don't believe in God. I think so-and-so is an idiot, even if he is some supernatural figure. And if you want to pass legislation to prevent people from doing that, you're moving yourself into the realm of authoritarianism. They're not harming anyone directly. If you want to have the subjective idea that by someone saying they don't believe in God, that is somehow going to have some social impact that's going to lead to X, Y, and Z, you are making the appeal to probability or potentiality argument, which is not an objective way of looking at things. So yes, blasphemy laws should not be reinstated. And should they be reinstated? No. Government action should neither aid nor attack any religion. Yes, that's all it is. Religious organizations should not be exempt from taxation. Religious organizations should not be exempt from taxation. Well, I don't believe any organization should be taxed, period. Religious organizations should not be exempt from taxation. Oh, well, this is tricky. I would disagree with that. I think they should be definitely exempt from taxation. All organizations should be exempt from taxation. So, yeah, that's my answer to that. You have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide is a valid statement. You have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide. I understand the context of that question, which is essentially saying that if you haven't done anything wrong, you shouldn't feel the need to hide something. Well, that may or may not be true, but you sure as hell don't have the right to look at my own private property because I have nothing to fear. And if I was an innocent person, I wouldn't be trying to hide it. That's ridiculous. The fact of the matter is people can often use information about you to blackmail you. Information that may be technically illegal for you to... For instance, if someone looked at my computers and found that there was evidence for me having certain illegal contraband. Now, it may be illegal within the confines of the law to have that, and they could use that to blackmail me. But within the realms of morality, as far as lawfully speaking, there's nothing wrong with doing that. If there is no victim, there is no crime. So, based off of the idea that people can often use information about you to blackmail you to do horrible things, it's understandable that people would be fearful in regards to giving access to all their information. So, you have nothing to fear if you have nothing to hide? Disagree with. Government transparency is vital to ensuring accountability. Yes, obviously. Government surveillance should be expanded to combat terrorism. Disagree with that and justifies the means. You don't have the right to survey my own private affairs because you're trying to combat terrorism. That's like me breaking into your house and stealing shit from you in order to use the money to combat terrorism. It's not acceptable. People should be secure in their personal homes and communications. It's always weird when you hear this kind of argument. Yeah, be great. Be great if people were secure. People should be able to fly and shoot fireballs out of their asses. Yeah, they should be able to do that. That should be great. Fantastic. But as to whether or not we're talking about the moral significance of this and from a greater perspective, the political significance of this. Would I consider it a good thing if people were secure in their homes, property, and communications? Sure, I would. That would be a great thing. I'd be strongly in agreement with that. In order to solve crimes, the police need the power to conduct searches and seizures without consent. No. That's just ridiculous. If you actually know for a fact someone has done something that is wrong, then yeah, of course, you'd have a right to actually go out and search them. However, if you simply suspect that they have, that's not enough to actually do something like that. Anyone can use the justification that they suspect that you're a criminal to do anything they want. It's not acceptable. So yes, the whole idea of having some kind of a warrant means that there's probable cause. I wouldn't even agree with that. I think you need to have definitive cause for you to violate someone in order for you to do something like that. But to address this particular question, in order to solve crimes, the police need the power to conduct searches and seizures without consent or warrant. Disagree with that. Sexual orientation, preference, gender, or gender identity should have no impact on the government's treatment of individuals. Yes, obviously. Government should have the authority to define, license, or restrict personal relationships. Hell no. The idea that the government has the right to... I have to get permission from the government whether or not I can ride a bike, drive a car. No, I shouldn't have to do that. The fact that a lot of people think you do is because they've been brainwashed into thinking that somehow you need to ask the government permission for these freedoms that you already have. I mean, if we lived in a free society and the government suddenly said, you know what, we're not going to have a system where you need to ask us permission before you go to the toilet. people would think that was insane. But if you have a system where this has been the norm for such a long time, now people have kind of like gone into this idea that it's perfectly acceptable for the government to give you permission to do basic things that you should have the right to do, like having a license, who you choose to have a relationship with. I don't care what the government thinks. I don't care. Who I choose to have a relationship with is purely between me and the individual. Provided they are able to make decisions for themselves, they understand the consequences of their actions, regardless of whether or not the society deems them as being capable of making these decisions, that is irrelevant. If two consenting people, when I say consenting, they have the ability to consent, that is all that matters. It's not something that is subject to age or any other characteristic that we may be able to identify on an objective level, other than the fact that they are able to consent to that themselves. If you want to look at this purely within the lines of voluntarism, as soon as you start putting in these restrictions like, well, they have to pass a certain test or something along those lines to prove to me that they're capable of making decisions for themselves, you're putting yourself into this realm of restriction that people in place on certain rules in order to appease their own senses, when the reality is, if you follow this thing through the logical reasoning, ultimately people have the right to do anything they want, provided it's voluntary, provided they're able to make decisions for themselves. And regardless of whether or not you may think that's going to bring about the best society is irrelevant. So government should have the authority to define license? Hell no, should not. Okay. Disagree. Consenting adults should be free to choose their own sexual practices and personal relationships? Hell yes. Access to abortion should be regulated by the government? Hell no. Now, once again, unpopular standpoint, but the libertarian voluntarist position is definitive on this one. People have autonomy of their own physical body. That is the fundamental, inalienable right that supersedes all other rights. Self-autonomy of your own physical being. The idea of the government having the right to prevent you, to force you to give birth is ridiculous. It is your own physical body. It would be just as foolish for the government to force you to give up one of your kidneys to save an individual. I mean, if something is reliant on your own body or your own facilities in order to survive, something that is yours, something that you own, that person does not have a claim to your own property. Now, granted, they may die from that, provided you don't give up your rights. The fact of the matter is, from a definitive standpoint, you cannot force someone to bring a fetus into full maturation. Doing that is a violation. And granted, you can have any moral judgment on that as you wish. The fact of the matter is, from a definitive standpoint, cannot do that. Cannot force someone to have abortion. Can't force someone to go through the pregnancy. You cannot force anyone to do anything they want with their own physical body. End of story. And all arguments to the contrary are immaterial to this point. People can make whatever judgment they want on this. Most of these arguments are not along the lines of what I want, what I think is moral per se. They're along the lines of objectivism, along the lines of it being immoral for you to violate people in order to do that. You can make your own judgments on the moral fiber of someone in doing certain things, like we all do. For instance, by someone not helping, by someone making to do something that is going to be more detrimental in the long run. Yeah, you can make your own subjective judgments, but from a definitive voluntarist position, it is as definitive as 1 + 1 equals 2. Access to abortion should be regulated by the government? Hell no. All right, moving on. Criminal laws should be limited to violation of the rights of others through force or fraud. Yes. If there is no victim, there is no crime. As opposed to having all of these laws along the lines of, well, if you do so and so, it may lead to problems, therefore we're going to make it illegal for you to do this and restrict your rights. That's what you call plunder. You're stealing someone's rights. You're stealing something that is theirs from them in order to achieve whatever goals you want, but it is still definitively wrong. Definitively wrong. Actually, yes. Should be limited to violation of the rights of others through force or fraud. Yes. No victim, no crime. As I keep saying, no victim, no crime. Totally agree with that. Banned medicinal and recreational drugs should remain illegal. Hell no. What I put in my body is not your concern, it's mine. Now, people make the argument, it's going to statistically, people that take drugs, it leads to more crimes, and you're going to create more crimes in society. That's irrelevant. You're appealing to statistics. You're appealing to probability. You can use that to justify anything. You could say that people that become fat and eat too much of X and Y, they're going to create more problems in the world because we're going to have to pay for their health, and it's going to lead to X, Y, but that's irrelevant. You can't appeal to probability. Someone is either violating your rights or they're not. People have a right to put whatever they want in their own body. Your own sovereignty is the most fundamental thing, as I keep saying. Granted, I may have my own judgments on people that use recreational drugs, and whether or not you choose to believe me, I don't. I personally don't do that for my own personal reasons. Don't take alcohol, caffeine, or any hallucinogenic substances for that matter. But more than anyone that I know, I tend to be more pro-drugs than any person I've come across, because the idea is completely insane. Just as it may be insane to actually take these substances, it is far more insane that someone has the right to prevent people from taking these substances. That idea is so toxic and is the fundamental problem that we have in society. People feeling as if they need to control other people's lives, feel they need to protect other people, when one of the worst things that you can do is play this appeal to protection game that many of us play. In order to bring about the best world, we will take away the rights of others, and the ends justifies the means. From a voluntary standpoint, you can't do that. Voluntary is a position of humility, knowing that you do not know what is best for someone, therefore you do not believe it is ever right to violate their own freedom. Now granted, we may not do that in certain situations, and there are many situations where I'd be willing to do things against someone's will. I'm not a perfect human being. The distinction, though, is I still maintain that is the wrong thing to do. So in regards to banning medicinal or recreational drugs, hell no, you can't ban that shit. Disagree. Okay. Police, fire, and ambulance services should be provided by the market. Yes. Government has no right to steal monies from people and use that to provide these services and justify the means. Yes. Individuals who voluntarily assume risk of physical harm to themselves are a burden on society, and such behavior should be banned. No, that's stupid. It's like, it's like, for me to go around and do certain things like performing parkour, free running on the streets, a lot of people consider that dangerous. But for someone that has been doing it for a long time, it's not dangerous because he has the ability to control his physical body. For you to subjectively say that is dangerous, therefore I'm not going to allow you to do that, is once again unlocking the shut door to the palace of the king, as I often like to say. But you to think that it's all right to prevent people from doing something in order to bring about good, that's how we get into all these problems. You can't do that. I have a right to do what I want with my own body and to take whatever risk I want, provided I am not violating the rights of an individual. The fact that you may subjectively see me as putting you at risk is irrelevant. It's like seeing me on the street and you think that I'm a risk to you because I have big muscles and I'm black. That's your own subjective valuation on the risk that I pose to you. Risk is a subjective construct. When it comes to definitive things like actual violation, actual initiation of violence, that's something we can deal with. Okay, so to answer this question, disagree. Restitution should be paid to victims at the expense of the criminal or negligent wrongdoer. Yes, agree with that. I'm all for restitution. What I'm not for is punishment per se, along the lines of imprisoning people. That doesn't really solve anything. Just from a utilitarian perspective, someone may have done something that's wrong, but putting them in jail is not really addressing the problem. It's just going to create more criminals. And yeah, restitution is a good way to deal with it. But putting them in a prison cell doesn't achieve anything. So agree with that totally. Rights such as due process and the presumption of innocence are relics of the past and only interfere with obtaining criminal convictions. Relics of the past? Hell no. That's the fundamental basis of a good moral system. Don't assume someone to have done something that's wrong until you actually have the evidence. Refrain from judgment until you're more conversant with the facts. Hate when people just accuse people of doing things. Oh, I don't trust him. He's a shitty person. He's probably done this stuff before. That may be so, but don't utter false accusations like that. And sure as hell don't incarcerate people because you think they may have done something that's wrong. That's not how a good system of justice is supposed to work. Moving on. Juries should be able to judge not just the facts of the case, but also the justice of the law. This is what you call jury nullification. I love this. This is the idea that if someone has been incarcerated for doing a crime that is wrong, so along the lines of it being... Actually, let me rephrase that. If someone has been incarcerated for doing something that's illegal, however, the crime is not a bad crime. I mean, it is not immoral as such. Example, taking marijuana. That is illegal, but it is not immoral. It has no victim, therefore it has no crime. The jury, if the jury decides to give you a slap on the wrist, or just say they're not going to punish you, that's what you call jury nullification. That's a great idea. So if a law is not just, and most of the laws, I'd say 80% of the laws are not just, the jury doesn't have to prosecute. Well, doesn't have to allow for that person to go into jail. So definitely in line with that. Dispute resolution cannot be effectively provided by the market and thus require a government-controlled justice system. Disagree. It can be handled by the market. Okay. Prisons, as they currently exist, should be abolished. Definitely. I don't believe in prisons. I believe in restitution. I think they're a horrible idea. They just create more criminals. The majority of the people in prisons are there for victimless crimes. The idea of advocating for prison means that you advocate for injustice. And suffice to say, that's not a very moral thing. Okay. Moving on. The only legitimate use of force is in defense of individual rights, life, liberty, and justice, acquired property, and justly acquired property against aggression. Yes. All people have the right to self-defense, and they may agree to be aided by any other individual group, of course. Some people are in the mindset that self-defense doesn't include the right to actually defend other people that are being aggressed upon. Of course it does. If you see someone getting the shit kicked out of them, of course you have a right to defend them. Just because it doesn't involve the self doesn't. That's not the concept behind self-defense. Self-defense is the idea that you have a right to defend yourself and others if they have been aggressed upon. That's the idea of self-defense. Yes, yes, yes. Individuals do not have the right to keep and bear arms. Nonsense. Holding arms does not violate any immoral doing. It's like saying, oh, wait a sec, you're a boxer and you're dangerous, therefore I'm not going to allow you to be around here. Just because someone has a weapon and there's the possibility that that person may use that to do some harm does not mean that they are going to do that harm. And for you to say that because someone has the potential to do harm, you're going to pass laws to prevent them from carrying a weapon or carrying any other device that is not directly harming anyone, puts you in some dangerous territory. Can't do that. So disagree. People should be prosecuted for exercising their right to self-defense. Disagree. Private property owners should be free to set the rules regarding the presence of weapons on their own property. Yeah, sure. If I don't want you bringing weapons into my own home, my own property, that's my right. It's common sense, of course. Government should restrict, register, and monitor the ownership, manufacture, and transfer of firearms and ammunition. Stuff that. You don't have a right to do that. If I don't want to give up details about weapon that I bought, that's my own prerogative. Government should not be involved in doing anything. Respect for private property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society. Yes, indeed. Need to have respect for private property. If you do not, we're constantly going to be fighting over who owns what. And the philosophy behind this is, if obviously you own your body, if you've applied your own time, energy, and effort into creating something that is not owned by anyone and is not a sentient being, is simply some inanimate thing that we have, obviously by applying my time and energy onto it, I have a higher claim to it than you do. Therefore, for you to say, wait a sec, that device that you created through property that is not necessarily yours to begin with is now mine. Let me put this in more simple terms. Essentially, I cannot claim something that you are using is mine if you are using that and if you have created that, provided I have no claim to it. I have not created it, and it is something that does not belong to anyone, and you have a high claim to it. I cannot take that as my rightful property. That's sensible. And for me to do so would mean it's not logically consistent. Then we have a situation where we're both fighting for property, and more importantly, it's not going to work. And it's also not right. Okay, so respect for private property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society. Yes. Contracts to obtain, retain, profit from, manage, or dispose of one's property, private property should be regulated by the government. Disagree. Private property owners have the right to control and enjoy their property so long as their choices do not harm nor infringe on the rights of others. Yes, of course. The practices of eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture should be abolished. Absolutely. Eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture deals with the government believing they have the right to take your property and exchange it for something else. Like they did this with gold back in the day. They would essentially just steal the gold from people. Yes, steal. That's what it's called when you take something that is not yours. Yes, they take people's gold and they would lock them up if they were not willing to give up their gold. and they would exchange that gold for these fake federal notes and say, here's your fake money. Give us your gold so that we can use that to fund our wars. And we're going to call this, government tax, or come up with some other word, and then try to make some stupid arbitrary distinction between that and actual theft. People that want to redefine terms like this in order to justify what they're doing, they are what I call disingenuous people. People that know what they're doing, but are making this... To me, I find that to be the most annoying thing, because it's intellectually dishonest. We both know exactly what is going on here. If you want to make the argument that based off of this scenario, you don't have an issue with it, fair enough. I would disagree with you. But if you want to redefine that term and say that it's not theft because of X and Y, it's just cement. It's so stupid. And it makes this conversation just stale, because we can never have a truly honest conversation. People completely understand what's going on over here. The idea of proclaiming that it's not theft is just stupid. It's unwise and stupid. And for me to steal something from you, to take something that is not yours, that does not belong to me, and then for me to take that and go do whatever I want with it, and then to make some more money by selling that, and then to give you something else in return, or even to give you what I've taken in return, it does not change the fact that it was theft to begin with. This is the crazy kind of airy-fairy thinking that takes about when you fall into collectivist thinking. Ends justifies the means thinking, as opposed to an anarchic system of thinking, as opposed to voluntarism, as opposed to an objective system of ethics. One is like a system of mathematics. The other is a system of squirrely lines that have no beginning, have no end, are a figment of your air and imagination. They are completely subjective, amorphous ideas that have no basis in reality. And one is an objective way of seeing the world. And granted, we can disagree on certain things, then there are certain things that are definitely not definitive. Then there are other things that are just clearly ridiculous. Certain ideas that are perpetuated whenever we deal with this conversation in regards to theft violations that are clearly built off nonsense. So, look, to answer this question, it's always wrong for the government to take shit that's not theirs and give you something else in return for it. Yeah. Oh, should be abolished. Hell yes. In order to protect the poor from the rich, limits on profits, production mandates, and controls on prices of goods and services are necessary. Maybe so. In order to protect the poor from the rich, I don't think so. But more importantly, you don't have a... See, the thing about me is I don't look at this along the lines of economics. Economically, as a lot of the anarcho-capitalists maintain, all of this may be a great way of bringing about the most prosperous nation. But fundamentally, the number one question should be: is it right? Is it moral? This is what moral philosophy dictates. This is what any person, any student of philosophy would understand. This is predicated on the thousands of years of philosophy that we've gone through. Of course, with postmodernism over the last hundred or so years, we have this system of utilitarian ethics along the lines of consequentialism that is not within the realms of definitive deontological first principles. And myself, being a student of classical philosophy, having gone through tens of thousands of hours of this stuff since I was 9, reading hundreds of works from all the classical philosophers, the fundamental theme is principle-based. Whether you want to go into Vedic scripture, whether you want to go into Stoicism, you want to go into deontological principles, you want to go into any of the classical literature, there are things along the lines of virtues, of principles here. But as soon as we bring ourselves into the modern society, we start looking at things not based off of common law, based off of these principles established within the Enlightenment era, but we move into cost-risk analysis, trying to see what our actions are going to lead to, and it just becomes this big, airy-fairy dilemma of us being able to do anything if we can, using this probability model, determine what is going to lead to the most amount of good, which is an amorphous idea, which is not built off of definitive certitudes. It's built off of possibilities, and we're all living in this bubble of possibility. Anyway, I went into quite a tangent there. To answer this question, in order to protect the poor from the rich, limits on profits, production mandates, and controls on prices of goods and services are necessary. No, disagree. For voluntary dealings, parties should be free to trade with who they want and on mutually agreeable terms. Yes, of course, should have a right to do that. Blah, blah, blah. Private landowners do not have an incentive to maintain natural resources and as such need to be regulated by the government. Disagree. Can't regulate squat. To prevent government pollution and misuse of natural resources, public land should be privatized. Now, this is an economic concept. To be completely honest with you, now, I don't know definitively. Anytime we're dealing on what is going to lead to the most amount of good, I don't know in my humility. Yeah, I'm inclined to think. It's taken me some time to acquiesce to the anarcho-capitalist school of thoughts in regards to what's going to be more practical in regards to creating the best society. And yeah, I think you can often find yourself in a tragedy of the common scenario. If you have all this public land, anyone can use it. Most people don't have any respect for it. When you have private property, people have an incentive towards making the best private property that they can because it's theirs. They eventually want to be able to sell this, profit from it. Therefore, they have an incentive to take the best care that they can from it. So I'm inclined to think when properties are privatized, it does tend to lead to better conditions. So whether or not that is true, I cannot say definitively, but that is something that I'm inclined to believe. As to whether or not the government should have any say in the matter, no, I don't think they should have a right to do that. So yeah, I think it should be privatized. I think it'd be a better thing. Protecting the environment requires that resources like land, water, air, and wildlife be held in common and private ownership restricted. Protecting the environment requires that resources like land, water, and air be held in common and private ownership restricted. I'm inclined to say no. Once again. Of course, I cannot say for certain, but I'm inclined to think that, yeah, private ownership will avoid leading to a tragedy of the common scenario. Not to say that people can actually claim certain things like water, air. There are certain things that are off limits. You cannot claim air. You cannot claim there. You can't just suddenly claim masses of land that are not being that are simply not being occupied by anyone. Therefore, if I discover some massive land and no one's on it, like to secure that, fair enough. If you can secure it, now granted, this is somewhat a subjective idea, but I would say the requirements in order to actually secure land, for land to actually be yours, is it needs to belong to no one. Your claim to it needs to be higher. You need to be able to secure that land. You need to currently be residing on it, using that land, making use of it. The idea of just seeing something and then claiming that is yours, therefore I see a planet, I discovered a planet, that planet's mine, no one else owns it, that becomes ridiculous. And granted, we are, through our own minds, we are arriving at some things that make sense logically and which others are willing to actually adhere to within the realms of having a system of agreed upon rules as to how we govern our moral interactions. And I would say that in order for something to be claimed by someone needs to be residing on it. This is the fundamental thing that you'll find within libertarian Lockean ethics. You need to be residing within that block of land. It needs to be yours, so no other person has a claim to it higher than yours. But the idea of just saying, oh wait, I claim this is my land, no one's on it, like that's happened in history, even though it's been owned by other people before you, and they currently have a high claim to it. The idea of saying that because you can see this, even though you're not occupying it, it's yours, that's ridiculous. So, somewhat a more complicated issue, but look, as to whether I think it's going to be better if it's more private ownership is in place, yeah, sure, I tend to agree with that. So, disagree with that. Moving on. The profit motive stifles the innovation and behavioral changes required to protect the environment, requiring intervention in the marketplace. The profit motive stifles the innovations and behavioral changes required to protect the environment, requiring the intervention in the market. Disagree. Environmental advocates and social pressure are a more effective means of changing public behavior than government action. Yes, agree. Social pressure is much more effective rather than using force. Subsidies for energy production should be abolished. Yes, abolish. Subsidies require the government taxing other people and then giving that money to other people. Definitely not acceptable. Energy pricing, allocation, production are too important to be left to the market and should be controlled by the government. Disagree. Should the government do anything? The answer is no. People who think they are entitled to keep what they earn are merely being selfish and should be forced to pay their fair share. No, you're actually being immoral and being violent. Now, granted, you can make the argument that people that are keeping their money, they are subjectively, in your mindset, being selfish. As soon as you want to force them to give up their money, things that they've rightfully claimed themselves, voluntarily speaking, it's immoral. You're initiating violence in them. It may not seem like you're doing that because you're getting other people to do it for you. But if essentially you're saying, oh, you have too much money, subjectively, I'm going to take that money away from you. Oh, that's theft. I'm also going to use that money to help other people. It's still theft. It doesn't somehow magically not become theft because of what you've decided to do with that money. If you steal something from someone, end of story. It's theft. Can't do that. And if you don't want it done to you, don't do it. Now, granted, you have people like, who's the author of Harry Potter? J.K. Rowling. I think she recently lost her $1 billion status because she gave up so much of her money. Something like that is absolutely amazing. That's what people should do. I think it's incumbent upon you, in my own subjective idea, when you have a tremendous amount of wealth, when you have a tremendous amount of ability, to use that in order to enact change in the world. Of course, you don't have to, but yeah, society's probably going to look at you not favorably unless you do something like that. But you can't force people to do that kind of stuff. As soon as you do, this is the distinction between voluntarism and objective ethics between socialism, which deals with airy-fairy, fuzzy ideas like, oh, you have too much wealth. Oh, you're too greedy. Oh, let me take some of this away from you. There's no definitive measure over here. Of course, people are going to come up with their own models to define what percentage it becomes acceptable to steal something from someone. Is something slavery when you're taking 99% of their or 100% of their wealth? Is it not slavery if you're taking 99%? Or what about 1%? It's always this subjective idea. However, in the realms of voluntarism, it's either theft or it's not theft. As soon as you're taking even a fraction of something that is not yours, it's theft. So to answer this question, people who think they are entitled to keep what they earn are being merely selfish and should be forced to pay their fair share. Hell no. Taxation of the price we pay for civilization? Hell no. Taxation is theft. Disagree. Government budgets should be balanced by curbing expenditure and not by raising taxes. Yes, curb the expenditure, damn it. Don't be... agree with that. Don't be taxing other people and using that to fund your big regime, allowing government just to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, we need to make society more prosperous. The only way to bring about a society more prosperous is to have people share their wealth. Oh, you mean to have the government take that wealth away from them and use that to fund wars? Oh yeah, that's a great idea. I don't think so. People should be free to choose which products and services they wish to purchase and not be forced to pay for something against their will. Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Free market banking with competition among banks and depository institutions of all types is preferable to a system controlled by... Yes. Profits and losses should be socialized? Hell no. If I lose money, I should have to make up that money. I shouldn't be able to steal that money from other people that profited. And if I make money, I shouldn't have to give up that money to give it to people that have been poor with their judgments. Stuff that nonsense. No, thank you. Individuals who engage in voluntary exchange should be free to use as money and any mutual agreeable commodity or item. Yes, of course. It's voluntary interaction. Love that. Inflationary monetary policies and legal tender should be abolished. Yeah. This is the whole realm of Keynesian economics, the idea of manipulating the money supply. Oh, let's print lots and lots of money. Now, granted, if it was all voluntary, and you could choose what system of money you wanted to use, like we have other cryptocurrencies now, let's say that they're all perfectly legal, and there was a system of fiat currency where, certain groups would manipulate that money, and everyone wanted to be part of that. They were on board with that. They're on the mindset that this is going to be the best system, and they voluntarily want to partake in that. That's fine. But as soon as you start saying we're not going to allow you to use any other currency but our own fiat currency, and then we're going to manipulate this, we're going to steal them effectively by printing lots of money and devaluing over time the worth of other people's money, that's essentially theft. I mean, it doesn't seem as tangible because it's happening over time, but every 30 years you lose your own half of the worth of your dollar through these approaches to manipulate the money supply that the Federal Reserve and banks through the consent of the government often do. So, quite frankly, I'm not in line with that. I mean, yes, they should be abolished. Boom. Money should be abolished. Oh, shut up. You fucking hippies. This is what people fail to understand. They just say things that sound nice. Money's the root of all evil. I don't like money. It's wrong. Oh my god, it's wrong. How you always think about money? Money's just so wrong. It's horrible. Here's the thing. It's essentially agorism. If I grow a tomato and I want to use that tomato and exchange that for your service, okay? So you can give me a massage. Wink, wink. I have a right to do that. As soon as you now have, let's say, a note that represents the amount of tomatoes that you have, and I give this tomato to you, this note to you rather, the note that says, oh, wait a sec, if you hand this note to a bank, they will give you 1 tomato. That's somehow immoral. No, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. It's simply a form of trade. It's consensual. It is working on the same basis as exchanging a tomato for another service. It's a mutual form of altruism. It's forced altruism. I have something that you want, and you have something that I want. And we both trade, and we get what we want. Now we're both happy. Woo, whoopee! As opposed to me giving you something that I don't want to depart with just to make you happy. Now I feel like shit. Now, when people want to call that like real sacrifice, that's altruism. You know what's better? When you win and I win. That's even better than the whole sacrificial thing. Something that doesn't have to be sacrificial in order for it to be good. Profit is actually better than sacrifice. I mean, the kinds of profit I'm talking about. I mean, you get happy and I get happy. The best interaction is when two people are happy. I don't like being around people that aren't happy when they have to give up shit. Like someone gives up something they don't want to give up begrudgingly, and then you feel shit about it. I don't want to take something from you if you don't want to give it to me. But if you give it to me and you feel like you're getting something even better, I'm like, oh yeah, it's awesome. It's kind of like sex, right? I mean, it feels good for me, and it feels good for you. It's not a case of, look, oh, please just have sex with me. I just want to feel good about me. But I don't care if you don't feel bad. If you feel bad about this interaction, no one wants that. No one wants to be having sex with someone that isn't enjoying it. Probably going a little off tangent over here, but the idea is, look, when something is mutually beneficial, it's better. Win-win situation. Money should not be abolished. Disagree, emphatically. Individuals have the right to form corporations, cooperatives, and other types of entities based on voluntary association. Yes, they do. If a group of people come together and decide to do something, provided it's voluntary, nothing wrong with it. Yes, yes, yes. Private ownership of the means of production should be abolished. No, it's what you call capitalism. Subsidies and bailouts to businesses, labor, and other special interests should be abolished. Yes, should be abolished. I mean, if you've stolen money from people and you use that to bail out banks and other organizations, that's not acceptable. Public entities should be able to compete with private enterprise. Well, by public entities, you're talking about the state, the government. For a lot of people who are not aware with that, they shouldn't be able to exist, period. So it's like saying, should someone that has stolen money from people and is using fraud be able to compete with someone that has not stolen money from people and is not using fraud? Well, I would say no. It's not fair. You shouldn't be able to compete with people if what you're doing is based off of doing shitty shit. Disagree. Employment and compensation agreements between employees and employees are private and should not be encumbered by social engineering. Yeah, they're private. What I do with my employer should be voluntary, and I don't have to, my employer, nor I, shouldn't have to adhere to any stupid regulations provided it's voluntary. Boom. Yes. Private employers and employees should be required by law to bargain with each other through a labor union. No, you don't have to do that. Membership in a labor union should be a requirement for obtaining employment. No, you shouldn't be forced to be part of a union. People say, well, it's for your own good. Hey, you know what's for your own good? For you to shut the fuck up. How about that? How about I force you to be quiet and say it's for your own good, because you don't know shit, and by you speaking your mind, you're only going to misinform people. Therefore, I'm not going to allow you to talk. Hey, I'm doing it for your own good. See the insanity that happens when you start thinking like that? No, dummy. People can say what they want. People can do what they want. Allow people to make their own mistakes. If people don't want to join a union, no, they don't have to do that. People don't want to get insurance, they don't have to do that. People don't want to use a condom, they don't have to use that. Of course, there are repercussions, but you can't force people to do that shit. You get the idea? This isn't about what I want. It's not what about you want. It's about what is free within your own individual rights. As soon as you start playing this subjective game, well, I think it's going to lead to this and it's going to be better. The reality is, most people don't want to admit it is a subjective idea that you have. It may very well lead to the best scenario, but you cannot say that definitively. Everyone wants to enforce rules on how people should govern their own lives. And people like myself just want to let people do what the hell they want to, make their own decisions for themselves. And you know what? Have people live their own lives while I live my own life. And granted, I want to have a sense of community, but I don't want to force people to be part of this community. Membership In a labor union should be a requirement for obtaining employment. Disagree. Boom. Damn it. Disagree. Compulsory arbitration obligations to bargain are necessary to ensure that bosses do not exploit their workers. Disagree. Provision of education should be socialized and made available free of charge. Hell no. You can't force that. Socialized nonsense. It's like, here's the thing. In order to bring about free education, once again, you need to have a government that steals money from rich people and then uses that money to fund these social things like education. Whereas, look, if people, like anything else, want to get educated, hell, we're in the 21st century. Information is free. If you want to go to some specialist and pay money, yeah, they should be able to charge you money. You shouldn't say, it's my right to be educated. You have to teach me. You're making people enforce. You're forcing people to educate you. I don't understand how this isn't common sense to people. You can't do that. Disagree. Education is best provided by the free market, achieving greater quality, accountability, and efficiency with more diversity of choice. Yes, free market. That essentially means that, look, if people provide a service for you and you're willing to pay for it, it's all good. If you don't want to pay for it, you don't have to. The education of children is the financial responsibility of parents or guardians, not the government. Agree with that. Health insurance companies exploit the sick and dying to make a profit and therefore should be regulated by the government. Hell no. Regulate my ass. Individuals should be free to determine the level of health insurance they want, if any. Yeah, if you don't want to be insured, that's your prerogative. Health care should be provided by the free market. Hell yes. Suicide and euthanasia should be legal. Oh, no. Look, I get it. Oh, no. I want to protect people. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's not about that. Yeah, and look, I'll be honest with you. Given a situation, if someone was really close to me, my own selfish behavior would probably try to prevent that person from killing themselves. However, it doesn't make it right. Can't force someone to stay alive and say that you're doing it for their own benefit. If someone wants to kill themselves because they're in extreme pain or they just don't want to live in this world and they want an option out, they have a right to do that. You can't make that illegal. Essentially what you're saying is I'm going to force people to stay alive and be part of this misery. You can't do that. Euthanasia, yes. It's mercy killing. If I want to pay someone to end my life because I'm in horrible pain, yeah, may not be the smartest decision, but you cannot once again put laws in place to prevent people from doing that. This is always what it comes down to. Notice the theme with this. This is like a chess game. Most people know how to play chess. You find that there are little kids that want to change the rules, make their knights move horizontally like rooks, and make their pawns move like queens, because they don't want to adhere to the rules of the game. Now, granted, there are some people that are really good at chess. There are a few of us. Then there are some people, but I would say most of us know how to play chess. It's just that you have people that are charlatans that want to try to change the rules in order to attain their goals. And because in the realm of morality, everyone wants to apply their own subjective notion of morality as opposed to applying the actual rules that are pretty common sense from an objective standpoint. We start getting this nonsense, and where people start defining things differently, and people have a different idea on what should be. But all laws should follow the basis of individual ethics. Common law is based off of the idea, if there is no victim, there is no crime. Based off of this idea that you have a right to do anything that you want, provided you're not violating the life, liberty, and property of individuals. Period. This is the philosophy of libertarianism. These are the principles that were established in the Enlightenment era. The founding fathers, Jefferson obviously with his version of the Bible, Jefferson Bible, a sanitized version of the Judeo-Christian ideals that were widespread within the society. It's basically a secular approach to looking at ethics, to do to others as you would want done to yourself. The golden law. Anyway, suicide and euthanasia should be legal. Disagree. Provision of health care should be socialized and made available free of charge. Disagree. You know how I feel on that stuff. Not all individuals will take responsibility for planning their retirement, therefore an age appealing to probability, potentiality. Oh, I don't have any money because I blew all my money on gambling and I'm an old man. What's going to happen to me? Well, you can rely on charities. I'll help you out. But you can't steal money or get other people to steal money from people to make you healthy. Can't do that. Disagree. Disagree. Socialized welfare programs should be phased out and replaced with a private voluntary system. Voluntary, notice that. Anytime you see that, see the word voluntary, you know it's a good thing. Voluntary system-based insurance, charity, and mutual aid. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Most people will not voluntarily help the poor, therefore it is incumbent on the government to provide welfare services. Once again, appealing to potentiality. People want to do this, so we're going to steal money from people and use that money to invest in these organizations to help people with their welfare. Disagree. Can't do that. Charity and civil society will weaken if government does not have the power to direct such activity. Disagree. In order to preserve global stability, the government needs to embrace foreign political alliances and act as policemen for the world. Hell no! Stuff your interventionist policy nonsense. It's not the way. Yeah, sure. If there's shit that's going on in another country, and there's some kind of world war going on, absolutely get yourself involved. But you don't have to. And it's actually a good recipe for disaster. I mean, it's a difficult scenario when you're seeing crap happen around you, but you need to realize that more times when you get yourself involved in situations like that, you're destroying your own stability. And unless, of course, it's very clear what is going on, more often than not, it's not. Best not to get yourself involved in that shit. Non-interventionism was the philosophy of the United States during its foundation, and it's actually still a good idea. A lot of people once subscribe to that. They'll take on this bleeding heart liberal mentality that you need to save the world. This positive rights nonsense. It's your responsibility to help other people. We just can't sit by and let those Iraqis, those Afghanistanis hurt all those people. We gotta take action. Otherwise, we're gonna have another 9/11. Oh, so because some random individual decides to drop a bomb on you, or kamikaze, they don't even really have bombs in most of these countries, or definitely anything on the level that the United States has. Because of that one action, we're going to go out and blow half a country, kill millions of people. Like, that's acceptable? Because we were trying to do some good? That's acceptable? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Disagree. Disagree. Service in the military should be compulsory. Hell no. It's kidnapping. Just take me and make me to fight in your stupid war and kill people? Hell no. Disagree. Rights are not inalienable and can be suspended during times of war. Then it's not a right. It's not what a right is. A right is immutable. If it is a principle, that which comes first is right, it cannot be taken away. That's what we're talking about when we talk about natural rights. Rights aren't things that change depending on whether or not you think it's a good idea. That's what we have. Well, that's what we call utilitarian ethics. I'm talking about individual rights here. Rights are inalienable. That means they cannot be changed. They're immutable. Okay. So disagree. Damn, I disagree. Intelligence agencies would be instructed from preserving security if they were subjected to oversight and transparency. Disagree. Government should not use secret classifications to keep from the public information that it should have. I agree with that. Secrecy is repugnant to a free society. Okay. Yep. Foreign policy should seek to keep a nation in a position of strength relative to other nations. Foreign policy should seek to keep a nation in a position of strength. Nah. That's this collectivist bullshit. My nation's better than yours. My country is the world, and my religion is to do good. I don't believe in patriotism. This idea of supporting my country regardless of what it does. This whole idea of nationalism is what causes so much of the problems in the world. Okay. I disagree with that. Foreign policy should emphasize defense against attack from abroad and enhance the likelihood of peace by avoiding foreign entanglements. Non-interventionism. That is what I was saying earlier. Agree with that. Foreign intervention, including military and economic aid, are necessary for preserving the security of the nation. Foreign intervention, including military and economic aid, are necessary for preserving the insecurity. Disagree, man. Not necessarily. All people have the right to resist tyranny and defend themselves and their rights. Of course. It's the whole idea of voluntarism. Impediments to free trade should be abolished. Yeah, absolutely. I have a right to trade with who I want. Political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained in the crossing of borders. Sure, I agree with that. Trade should be regulated by the government. Government? Hell no. Economic freedom demands the unrestricted movement of human as well as financial capital across national borders. Yes. Strongly agree. All people are born with an inherent right to their life, liberty, and property. Of course. Agree with that. Some rights can impose an obligation upon others to fulfill their... one of the most powerfully controversial philosophical ideas, what we call positive rights. More often than not, when you're speaking to libertarians, voluntarists, the main disagreements you will have will cross this path. And it's a position where most of us, I think, intuitively would side with, this is why most people think of healthcare as a good thing, or think of it being as a necessary in order to give up your wealth in order to help other people. The thing is, it is good to do those things, and I would call people to do those things more moral people. But what you cannot do, you can sacrifice yourself in order to bring about more good for others. You can't sacrifice other people, though. Altruism is self-sacrifice, but it's just plain evil when you sacrifice other people in order to bring about good, your version of good. When it comes to imposing an obligation upon others, like saying someone has a moral right to help you. If I don't have money, you have to give me that money. Yeah, if someone gives you money, it's called charity. It's a great thing. But as soon as you force them to, as soon as you get other people to take money away from them to give it to you, that's what we're calling immoral. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable calling that immoral, but it is. It's just a very clever way of doing it. And this is the problem. This is the main distinction between individual philosophies and collectivist philosophies. More often than not, every time I have this conversation, and I assure you, I have had this ad nauseum with more people than you can possibly imagine, both online and offline. And quite frankly, I've read so much philosophy on this, and you start seeing the themes. And regardless of what ideology I've been caught up in, I didn't even understand the definitions of socialism, anarcho-capitalism. I still don't. But the fundamental ideas I've held since I was a little kid. And even though I may not have been willing to go along with them, I've always known, it's wrong. I'd probably still do it. But there seems to be this idea people have where, and look, to be honest, I fell into this in a point where because you feel as if it's a good thing to, and it is, to help other people, you want to enforce that onto other people and say, unless of course you give up your time, give up your wealth, give up your energy, you risk your life to save other people, I'm going to lock you up. And that's the fundamental distinction between voluntarism and collectivist ideologies that are based off of this idea that because it is incumbent upon us to help everyone, we must force other people to give up their wealth, give up their freedoms in order to serve the greater good. And granted, that is a beautiful idea, or at least it sounds beautiful. It is actually one of the most pernicious ideas in philosophy because it leads to all of this relativistic thinking that allows people to justify anything. And whereas I can understand it. And the problem is that the reason why it is so effective is because there is an element of truth to it. There is an element of truth to this ideology that there is a part of us that recognizes that in order to be a truly moral person, we need to be concerned with other people other than ourselves. And it is incumbent upon us to want to do good. However, as soon as we start moving in this line of forcing other people to do that stuff, forcing other people to be charitable, then we are moving into very dangerous ground. So, ladies and gentlemen, there are my thoughts there. Some rights can impose an obligation upon others to fulfill that right. The answer is no. No. Government should neither deny nor abridge human rights based upon biological characteristics or personal preferences. In the words of Martin Luther King, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of the character. Independent of your biological characteristics, one should not... human rights is not going to change towards you. I don't care if you're black or white. You don't have more rights because you're black or because you're cisgender, whatever that word is. Rights are things that apply to all humans. I would say all sentient beings. I don't subscribe to this flawed notion that I've noticed some voluntarists have that, wait a sec, because I created something, it no longer has a right. I've heard this comment, this is kind of going off on a tangent over here, but in regards to rights, it does not matter whether or not someone is black, white, pink, or blue. If someone is a sentient being, it doesn't matter if you created that being, whether it is some kind of, and this is also a very tricky topic, which I'm kind of speaking about in very imaginative mindset, like the idea of artificial intelligence. Let's say if you were to create something that has awareness, sentience, once that thing has sentience, I don't care, once that thing is aware of its awareness, is actually sentient. End of story. You don't have it has rights. It has the ability to govern over itself, regardless of whether or not you've created it. Similarly, that applies to a human being, whether or not you've given birth to that thing. And here's the thing: I don't believe in that you're actually creating something by giving it birth. Or, fair enough, you may even put something into this Euclidean mate space. But consciousness, and this is going a little metaphysical here, it is something that is a product of something outside of this physical space. It is a non-local phenomenon, meaning that it is not located. Consciousness is not something that can be located within your brain. It's like there's this radio, which is a transceiver of the information. This is going to the whole idea of the extended mind here, realm of experimental science. Rupert Sheldrake has spoken a lot about this. Highly recommend checking out his stuff. But it's this idea that you are tapping into something outside of this physical Euclidean meat space. The idea of saying that you created this consciousness, you brought it into being, it's not something I side with. And I bring this up because a lot of people have this mindset that rights are that only exist to certain biological entities. Rights exist to all sentient beings, regardless of race, gender, whether they are human animals or non-human animals. Something that has the capability to understand its awareness simply has this embedded within it. It's a metaphysical idea, but this is inherent within the fundamental idea within rights. At least to me, from a philosophical stand. Anything contrary to this just leads to logical insanity. It leads to concepts like, oh, wait a sec, I created you so I can take you out of this world. Hey, yeah, you're my son, but I put you into existence so I can kill you. Oh, I created this artificial intelligence, and even though it's sentient, I can do whatever I want with it. It doesn't work. So in order to have consistency, logical consistency, in order to have something that is not only intuitively correct, but logically correct, I mean, clearly, if something doesn't resonate with you, the idea of saying that I created something, I can kill it, or because something is slightly different to me in physical characteristics, I can kill it, does not seem right. So, the government should neither deny nor abridge human rights based upon biological characteristics or personal preferences. This is very true, very true. And we're almost done. Members of private organizations can set standards of association, and individuals are free to respond with ostracism or boycotts. This is also very true. Deals with racism. An organization has the right to prevent people from entering that club. If I have my home and I don't want to allow black people to my home, I have a right to do that. And granted, it's douchey, and society should respond by ostracizing people like that. And I prefer that as opposed to the government forcing these racist people to allow me into their establishments. Now I don't know who's racist. Now I have to give them my money and support these racist people. When it would be much better if everything was voluntary, and if you didn't want to allow me into your establishment, now I could decide whether or not I wanted to give you money, or I wouldn't be able to give you money, rather, and I wouldn't have to feel bad about supporting someone that is not in line with my values. So, whereas we all want certain things, like we all want to have a society that is free from racism, once again, you don't have the right to force people to behave nicely and not be racist. Alright, so, yes, they can do this. Yada yada yada. Parents or other guardians have the right to raise their children according to their own standards and beliefs. Yes, of course they do. Parents should be able to abuse or neglect their children without fear of... It's nonsense. They do not. Without the state, there would be chaos and disorder. Nonsense. Of course, people don't need government, don't need power, authority in order to behave like human beings. If anything, it's the state that facilitates so much of this corrupt, immoral behavior. So I disagree with that. It is the right of every individual to resist tyranny and abolish it, replacing it with a system that respects individual rights. Yes, it is absolutely your right. Of course, you don't have to. You can go along with it, and it's probably most likely going to lead to a less free world. But yeah, absolutely, you have the right to resist tyranny. The sign of a good person is not someone that obeys the just laws, but also disobeys unjust laws. Resistance is the fundamental theme within all good people. People that blindly follow the certitudes of the times, well, they're not heroes. Alright, so, yes, it is very much right. It is very much everyone's right to resist tyranny. The state should be abolished. Hell yes. And there you have it. Perfect score. And one of the things I like about this is, if you've seen a result that is not perfect, most likely it's because you've interpreted the question differently, or there's been an error in the way in which you've looked at this from a voluntarist perspective. A lot of people look at all morality as being subjective. That is the case if you're looking at things within the realms of collectivist ethics, along the lines of virtues and values that you may or may not have. However, the thing I love about objectivism, voluntarism, and anarcho-capitalism is that if you define things correctly, and it becomes tricky when you're dealing with language, because whereas with mathematics things are definitive, we understand the values of certain numbers. When it comes to words, I must admit the first time I did this thing, I have done this before, got 100, but I've done plenty of these things before where I've misinterpreted the way in which they intended questions. In fact, there's another segment of this, another political spectrum test, and the way in which they phrase the questions and the way in which you want to interpret them will give you different answers. But when you define things in a very clear, precise way, this is a very definitive thing. There are certain actions that require you to violate others and others that don't. And this is ultimately what it comes down to. Now, granted, some things don't always make perfect intuitive understanding, based on the fact that most of us want to be good people. However, I can definitively say that if, in order for you to be a good person, you have to violate other people, intuitively and logically, it's not being a good person. It's just that your society has created this system where it's acceptable to do things like that, and we're all on board with it. But I think it's important to always look at the way in which you see the world. Always try to see things not just for what you want them to be, but what are in alignment with sense and logic. And don't do anything unless, of course, it resonates with your intuition, but also as well as your logic and reasoning. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. That is my political spectrum. I come across as an anarcho-capitalist. And look, I don't even like that term. I find a lot of the anarchists, they hate the idea of anarcho-capitalism because it's all about money, man. No, it's all about this idea that you respect not only individual freedoms, which I think most of us agree with. Most people agree that you own yourself. Of course, the natural logical extension is property. A lot of people look at property as this arbitrary thing, but it's just, to me, it's perfectly rational and consistent that obviously you have a high claim to something if you have devoted your time and energy in towards creating that thing, and it is not owned by someone. I mean, so some people that are under the mindset that no one owns anything. Well, clearly I own myself. And clearly if someone is not using something and I've applied my own time and energy, for instance, even if I've created an idea out of my own mind, constructed something, and I have used this to, let's say I created a song, and I want to sell this song to someone. Now, granted, once I've sold it, provided that person has bought that under certain agreements, they have a right to do what they want with it, or within the confines of the agreement. But for someone to take something, let's say I created a song, and I have that in my mind, and I've created that as a song, for someone to steal that thing from me, to take it away without my consent, that's obviously a wrongdoing. For someone to say that, wait a sec, no one owns anything, therefore I can't steal it, that becomes an issue. When it comes to physical things, like actually applying your time and energy towards creating something. For instance, I created a device out of sticks and stones that no one owned within a public area of land. I applied my time and energy towards this. For someone to say, well, no one owns anything, so I'm taking this thing and I'm selling it to other people, that's ridiculous. And that's what you're going to arrive at if you take away any realm of property. Even for collectivist societies, people that work in this tribalistic mindset of sharing everything, I assure you, you're going to have certain disputes where someone has devoted a tremendous amount of their time to creating something, and if another person says, hey, this is mine, and there's disagreement there, we need to have a way of arriving at who owns what. And it can either be done logically, within reason, or it can be done through, hey, I feel like I own this shit, and because I'm trying to create something, I have a right to take it away, take the shit away from you. So, ladies and gentlemen, they are my thoughts. Let us know if you have any queries in regards to any of these questions. Love having these conversations. I will add just a few little points to this. One of the things that was not spoken about, was not addressed in any of these questions, was that I find are quite contentious. Was one, the concept of rite of passage. This is a very controversial issue. A lot of people like to look at libertarianism, voluntarism, try to find little flaws and try to find scenarios where, oh, you can see that this isn't going to work, therefore the whole thing falls apart. The rite of passage is a scenario where, let's say if someone has constructed land, or has, they actually have private ownership of certain property, and let's say they have enclosed your entire property. So now you have no way of exiting their property that they barricaded around you, unless, of course, you gain their permission. A lot of people say, well, here's a tricky situation, because, look, both of you have actually done things that are not in violation of the non-aggression principle, and now what? Now what? If someone wants to prevent you from, if the person that has enclosed you with their property wants to prevent you from being able to go out, well, you're tough luck. Well, here's the thing. I always like to use the chess scenario for this, because it's what you call an illegal move. There are certain things that you can do that are still an aggression. They may not have been a conscious aggression, it may not have been a conscious violation, but nonetheless they are. Just like in chess, when I first started playing chess, I would do this sometimes. For instance, in chess, when you put yourself in a situation where you were putting someone's king at threat, you say check. If that person does not address that issue, it allows you to just take their king away. People that play chess will understand what I'm talking about. Of course, you can't do that. Essentially, you can't perform someone cannot perform an illegal move. If they have made a move where, by making that move, it is going to allow for you to take their king in the next move, it's an illegal move. So I like to use that as a way of addressing this whole idea of illegal moves. If you've actually constructed land around someone else's land so that they have no way of actually exiting that, that is an illegal move. That is an aggression. Granted, it may not have been conscious. You have now created aggression towards them by creating land around their land. That move, in the point at which you prevent someone from being able to actually exit out of this vicinity because you've enclosed them, whether or not you did it consciously, it's something that you do not have the right to do. Therefore, in a situation like that, the person that has encased the individual with their land is the aggressor, and therefore they must allow that person to pass or rectify the situation. So, in regards to the rite of passage thing, that's how I answer that question. Someone has a right to, if there is no way for someone to exit a particular landmass, a particular area, because you have not consciously, but nonetheless aggressed upon them by cutting them off from being able to exit, that is an aggression. Then there are other issues along the lines of what I'd call the "you're a dick" scenario. For instance, a lot of people like to use the rules, and granted, we're using constructs over here to define what is right within the realms of the golden law. For instance, I would not want this done to me, therefore I won't do it to other people. When we're talking about property rights, when we're talking about ownership of land, let's say someone steps in your land. Someone has simply just stepped on the front porch. Now, granted, because someone has aggressed upon you by stepping on your land, a lot of people advocate they're in their right to shoot the person that has stepped into their land, which is ridiculous. I mean, granted, technically speaking, that person has passed over your land. However, it is not an appropriate response to someone doing that. You're being a dick. It's been referred to as the YAD clause. And the other thing, which becomes a little subjective, is that it needs to be an appropriate level of response to an aggression. For instance, if someone punches you in the face, you don't respond by getting a gun and blowing their brains out. You respond by, an appropriate response would be, hey, punch them back. Or you, if you're a bit more pacifist-like, have a conversation with them. But you don't escalate the violence to that level. And this has to do with an intuitive judgment that would need to be made. But the fundamental thing in regards to the non-aggression principle is the person that has actually started the violence that is the wrongdoer. A lot of people say that it doesn't matter who started it. Well, it does. It ultimately is always about the person that starts the violence. And that's how you determine who the aggressor is and how to proceed from there. And that's one of the things I love about the moral philosophy in regards to voluntarism. All of the moral philosophies are based off of subjective ideas on what we deem as going to lead to the most amount of good. They'll be based off of subjective notions. The way in which you define voluntarism based off of the first principles, you own yourself, you own the labor that you apply. Obviously, you cannot violate, you cannot rape, assault, commit force or fraud. And there are certain issues that become a little tricky in regards to who's actually initiated the violence. For instance, whether or not an action actually constitutes fraud, or it's just unfortunate an expression of something that is not true or is within the realms of a noble lie, or does not constitute actual fraud or actual theft. Now that can be tricky, but in regards to when these things have been done, it is very clear who the aggressor is. So, in a very decisive way, the school of thought around voluntarism is extremely objective, but you find the school of thought around collectivism is highly subjective and allows people to make any justification they can think of in order to create the most amount of good, and it leads to complete and utter logical insanity. And that's one of the reasons why I like the philosophy of voluntarism, because whereas I still have the heart of a socialist and that I want everyone to work together to create the best society, I get frustrated when I realize that people that will come up with any justification they can, when you constantly hear these governmental agents saying, well, we needed to invade them because they were a threat to us. Use subjective ideas like threat or you have too much money. People can use that justification to do anything. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, freaks and geeks, I'm going to leave it there. They're my thoughts, and that shows you where I come in the political spectrum of things. Let us know what you think. Peace out, keep it real. Don't drive in text. Boom shakalaka.
Life's purpose is to feel joy. Metaphysical, lyrical, said enough for truth. The only one that make change is walking in your shoes. Be the example, don't complain about the news. Making music and serving the world with the loo. Now you can be the same, or you can be the change. Find strength from inside, break through the chains. No one to blame, nothing to prove. You create your reality, it's up to you. Be the change.